So as the recent purchaser of an Airstream, I began to wonder, does the Airstream really tow better than other trailers of similar size and weight? Now, I have heard for quite a while that this is the case. I wasn't able to ever actually test it out myself, and I wanted to give that a try and see if that was accurate. So I'm going to show you some documentation here. Now, I've had two Lance travel trailers recently. I had a Trail Manor travel trailer before that. Now, that Trail Manor travel trailer, that was fantastic. I would get 12 to 13 miles per gallon towing that between 70 to 75. It's such a low profile, light trailer. That thing, when it came to trailering, it was great and it tracked amazingly well. However, it was a single axle trailer, and with all the driving I do, and I take trips that are 5,000, 6,000 miles, sometimes 7,000 miles at a time. I don't trust a single axle trailer so much, and if something does happen to it, essentially your trip is ruined. So I wanted to go ahead and get something double axle. We started with a Lance 2375, and I'm going to tell you about my experiences towing with that first. Now, as box trailers go, the Lances are known for being a relatively good towing vehicle. They're relatively light, they're relatively well built, and their overall shape makes them somewhat aerodynamic compared to most box trailers, or at least as much as a box trailer can be. But let's talk about my two most recent trips with those, which are relatively recent, being that it's August of 2022 right now. So I'm going to talk about my last trip across country with the 2375 I did in February of 2022, and particularly what I want to compare here is, since I've only had the Airstream a short period of time, is just trips on the eastern half of the country. I find there's a huge difference, and I've documented this, between the MPGs I get on the eastern half of the country and the MPGs I get in the western half of the country, as well as there's a huge difference between heading east and heading west versus necessarily heading north and heading south. When I tend to tow in a westward direction, I tend to, I'm traveling toward the west, I tend to get greatly reduced fuel MPGs compared to what I get heading in an eastward direction where the wind is behind me. But enough said about that. The last trip with the 2375 was in February of 2022. My wife and I took it out to California and then brought it back to Arizona, where we sold it to somebody on a trip. So we actually took it out to the Lance headquarters to have a couple things fixed on it before we sold it to somebody else. So on the trip out to California, the first 723 miles, just the eastern half of the country, is what I'm comparing here to, like, cross the Mississippi. So, and I document everything on Fuely, so I have these down. First 723 miles, we used 92.66 gallons, which works out to 7.8 miles per gallon, 7.80 miles per gallon, actually. Now, you may say, ooh, that sounds pretty bad. It does, but I can tell you, once I cross the Mississippi River, that goes up to typically about 9 on average. And when I come back, it usually exceeds 10.5 on the way back. So it's really, when people say, how much do you get towing? It really depends on what you have behind you, where you're heading, how is it loaded, and all those sorts of factors. But from that leg right there, and that's the legs we're going to compare, 7.8 gallons. Now, in May of this year, we took the 1995 on a very similar trip, same route, headed out west. We went out to Arizona and Utah this time in May. And as we headed west from our home in Georgia till we crossed the Mississippi for our first fill up, we went 767 miles this time and used 96.48 gallons. And that came in at 7.94. 9, so actually 7.95. So as you would expect, in May we did slightly better with the 1995 than we did with the 2375. It's slightly lighter, but really it's negligible when we're talking about 7.95 versus 7.80. And again, same thing, get west of the Mississippi, the MPGs go up, and then and I think largely as you're traveling through the western half of Texas and as you're traveling through Oklahoma, those things become flatter, and so you start to get better MPGs. Now, I haven't done that exact leg yet with my Airstream yet, and I should mention I tow with a 2018 Platinum Toyota Tundra four-wheel drive, but I have done one significant leg in our Airstream so far where we never unhooked. We kept it the whole time. It was all on the eastern half of the country. We took it again from our home in Georgia up to Northern Virginia, Shenandoah National Park, Blue Ridge Parkway. Did a little bit of driving around there, quite hilly there. We're certainly not doing the typical 70 to 75, but the whole way up and the whole way back as we went from I-20, which is very hilly, to I-77, which as you go north of Columbia, South Carolina, starts to flatten out a little bit, but then you get to 81 and it becomes quite hilly again. And it's 70 to 75 pretty much that whole route that I do with the travel trailer in tow. And for those of you that want to say, hey, that's too fast with the travel trailer, you know, I'm set up pretty well for that. I tow what I'm comfortable at, and I certainly don't tow that when it's heavy, and I spend the vast majority of my time in the right lane. Towing 70 to 75, so we left Georgia and did exactly 1,283 miles on that trip. We used 135.994 gallons of gas. That came in at 9.43 miles per gallon. That is approximately 20% better, roughly, than I did with that Lance travel trailer that was $23.75, and it's a little under 20% better, probably closer to about 16 to 17% better. I'll do the math on these and put up the actual numbers in the video, but a little bit better than that than the 1995. Well, what's the significance of the 1995? Well, the 1995 has a gross vehicle weight rating of 5,700 pounds. The travel trailer that we used has a gross vehicle weight rating, the Airstream, of 6,000 pounds. So they're very close in terms of the gross vehicle weight rating. But what they're even closer is, because I take all my vehicles, all my setups with my Tundra through the cat scales. Once I've got it figured out how I'm going to load it up, how I'm going to put my weight distribution hitch on, put all my gear in the truck, all the gear that we have in the travel trailer, where it's going to be located, I go ahead, I fill up the fresh water tanks, and I take it through the cat scales. I took them both through the cat scales. The Lance travel trailer had a total of 4,520 pounds on the trailer axles, and it was returning 640 pounds to the truck for percentage tongue weight, or hitch weight percentage, I should say, of 12.4%. And when you look at my Airstream, again, it's fully loaded with a freshwater tank, which it's only got a 30-gallon tank versus the Lance's 45. They both have 6 gallons of hot water, but the trailer axle actually had 4,900 pounds on it, and it was returning 10.6%. It actually ended up being, I think, closer to 10.7% to the truck. So when you look at those two together, the total in the trailer then would have been coming in right at 54.80 for the Airstream, and for the Lance travel trailer it would have been coming in at 51.50. So they were within a few hundred pounds of each other, with the Airstream being slightly heavier. And what can I tell you about that? What I can tell you is the Airstream felt a lot more secure. It just did. When anybody went by with a truck, you know, usually the problem you have is not a truck going the other direction, but a truck passing you if you're going a little slower than they are, and they give you a little push from a semi. None of that happened. The Airstream just tracked a lot better, felt a lot more sturdy behind me. I have to give it credit for that. So, in overall, does the Airstream actually tow better? Well, it does get better MPGs, and just the feel of driving it, it does track quite a bit better. So if you want to look at getting, you know, similar sized Airstream to a similar sized box trailer, you may give up a slide, you may give up something of that nature, but you are going to gain quite a bit in MPGs when you're talking about 15 to 20% if you're taking a long trip, but you're also going to gain some security in the overall feel of it while you're driving. One more thing I should say about towing that Airstream is when I first bought it, I towed it from Savannah, Georgia, back to my home near Augusta, Georgia. We did that. I tracked the MPGs pretty closely. We put them in. The truck read 11.0. When I did the math on the number, it was 10.98, and that was towing that Airstream from just south to north, essentially, where there usually in this part of the country is a little bit of push of a southerly wind. So probably did just a little bit better. Wasn't quite going as fast. That was more 65 to 70 than 70 to 75. But I did have a couple little towns where there were stop and go to go through that way as well, through Statesboro, through Waynesboro, and then once I got to Augusta, a little bit of stop and go. So if you enjoyed the content of this video, please go ahead and hit like and hit subscribe if you feel up to it. It lets me know what kind of content people would like to see in the future. And also, if you have any comments or any additional information to share, please go ahead and do so.